Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 6 of the Dusk Till Dawn podcast, the podcast of not the Dawn Network, but the Diverse Ability Network, as the recent name change happened in recent weeks. And I'm very happy to be co-hosting today with Sam Derrick. And then in terms of the actual podcast today itself, so it's all about neurodiversity, and we've got two lovely guests who've managed to come on today, so thank you very much. We've got Rebecca Fernandes, who is a team support assistant here at Centrica, and we also have Geen, who is a treasury market analyst here at Centrica. So thank you very much for coming on. Diving straight into the first topic of, because I know you both parent neurodiverse children, you know, how you get on day to day doing that.
So I've got 3 children, a daughter who's 10 and then 2 sons that are 7 and 6. And my 7-year-old has just been diagnosed with ADHD. And I also believe he's dyslexic as well. My youngest son also shows signs of ADHD. So day to day, every day is different. In fact, every hour can be different. There's never a dull moment. It can be really loud and lively, or it can be quite peaceful if they're gaming, because they're very happy if they're kind of non-stop online and playing Fortnite and whatnot on there. Just depends what the situation is. Homeschooling proved really difficult for us, especially trying to work through it, because I find if it's something that doesn't interest the boys, it is just absolutely impossible to try and get them to do that. They're very strong in their thoughts and very strong-willed, very big emotions, so that can mean that they melt down sometimes, and a meltdown can be anything from crying and shouting to sometimes violent outbursts, whether that's with each other or with us. So I sometimes feel like there's days where you feel like you have to be like Mother Teresa and just, almost like that nothing bother you and everything's okay. But equally, we're only human too, so it can be quite a challenge. But equally, I find that I'm quite laid back, and I think that helps, because I can, at the end of the day, especially when it's quiet and everyone's in bed, I can look back and laugh quite a lot about some of the things that have been said and done throughout the day. So that it definitely helps to have a sense of humour, I find.
I've got to say, you've always got a smile on your face when I see your face. And Kate, tell us a little bit about your experiences.
Yeah, so I've got to say, Bex, that's absolutely spot on, because if you can't laugh at what's happened to you throughout the day and at the end of the day, then really I think you'd just, you'd end up crying. So it's been challenging, but I wouldn't change anything about my experience with my sons. So they're 19, they're twins, they have an autism spectrum disorder, but they are anything but disordered. They're bright, they're clever, they're funny, and mostly they're individuals. So they're the same as everybody else. There's similarities between them, the same as there are between all of us, but they're very different. And I never know what each day is going to bring, except for a lack of respect on my time. I do know that is going to happen. That's a given. So, yeah, I think that we've had a hell of a time. We've had such a good time. I'm so thrilled poor Bex having to homeschool. If I'd had to homeschool my 2, we wouldn't have all come out of it alive. I'm pretty sure about that. But yeah, it's about finding the joy in your children, whoever they are. They've all got something fantastic to bring. And the more you worry about what they can't bring, the larger that becomes. So we just focus on the fun.
So Bex, I know we've spoken. I know you've had a bit of a journey to diagnosis. Do you guys want to sort of tell us a little bit, about how things came about for both of you? What sort of things you noticed? What that journey has been like?
So it was actually when my youngest started reception. So in October 2019, it just started, and we'd started getting feedback from the teachers that he was having outbursts in the class, and one of them resulted in the class being evacuated into the other side, and I was just absolutely mortified. And we'd not really had many problems with him at preschool, so it was kind of a shock. However, at home we did have the outbursts from him, and we just kind of put it down to him being the youngest and trying to be in control, because that's absolutely his thing. He has to be in control of the situation. So we'd gone in to talk to the teachers, and as parents, to be honest, I was just really embarrassed. I just remember thinking, oh my God, if he's showing like outbursts like this, they will just think he's getting that from home. That's what he's seeing at home, and that's, you know, that'll be their impression of us. And thankfully, the Senko teacher that was involved, so like the special educational needs coordinator, had said that a lot of the signs that he was showing did look like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And she was actually really helpful at starting the ball rolling with that. And only when I started doing the form filling, which I will say, the whole journey is form filling and tick boxes and doing it over and over again, did I realise that my older son, I could literally tick every box. And I was like, and then I felt quite guilty because I thought, why have I not noticed this? Because he'd had things said about him throughout the classes, and it was a lot of impulsivity, pushing, just not being able to sit still, fidgeting. But equally, I just kept getting told that's boys, you know, they do things that are a little bit, you know, different, and they won't be like my daughter. So I started the ball rolling with him then to go down, mainly with school, because Kate picked up on it that the word disorder just sounds so doom and gloom. And when I started to do my research on it, I was scared, because it's all about when they grow up, they can be quite depressed, full of anxiety, even things like being impulsive when they're older. I realised it's neurological, it's not behavioural. So it's going to be with them for life, and they can be risk takers. And I'm reading, I don't know why, it's the one thing that always sticks out in my mind is that they're more likely to have a car accident when they're older. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is just awful. They're not going to grow out of this. Which is when I then came onto the neurodiversity side of things, which is much more about celebrating what the brains can do, because both my sons are completely different. They display very differently, and it was more about them working with school to get rid of the tag of the behaviours, because it's very much centred about what they do and how they act at school. So Pedro, my middle child, who's just received a diagnosis, was always being told off for shouting out, and he would get consequences for shouting out. So I really had to work with the school and be like, he genuinely can't help that. His brain's telling him, the bit in the brain that will stop him making the decision like in a split second isn't there. It doesn't work. So he will just have these impulses, and to punish him for that was wrong.
Yeah.
So we were it's actually been quite quick as the diagnosis for Pedro, quicker than what I was expecting. So we've done the form filling. We've done it through school. We went to CAMS and they push it back to school. And we have the local like cluster team workers to work with us as a family, so that they can then put their case forward. And luckily everybody was cooperative. I do feel like as a parent, if I had have taken my foot off the pedal and been a little bit like, oh, diagnosis, and it's not that much of an issue, I don't think we'd have been where we are. I think you absolutely have to push and push to be listened to get anything, any services, even like with the school, to make sure that they're treating my children in the right way and not labelling them as the naughty children, because a lot of the behaviours just come across as naughty. So we literally got a diagnosis 2 weeks ago for Pedro, and because of COVID, it was all done via Zoom. It was very strange, really. It was with a psychiatrist, and instead of us going to CAMS as we would have done, because of COVID and because of the waiting list being so long, it was agreed that we could do it this way. And yeah, it was quite strange, really. It was still very much a tick box exercise. We went in there, everything that I'd already answered really in all of the questionnaires. I feel like they'd probably made up the decision from that, but it was good. We've got the result that he needed, really. So yeah, we're just waiting now for the next steps to find out what it really means to Pedro now. But it will help him at school now to make sure that he gets the help that he needs, and that it doesn't just carry around a label. I'm very conscious that it won't define him. It will just be to help him.
Yeah, so I know what you mean. It's sort of, you know, it's difficult with the labels. You've got the label of the naughty child, and you almost want the label of the diagnosis, because then people will be more understanding.
Yeah.
And, you know, you've got access to, I guess, certain benefits and things like that. Kate, what about you?
Well, I have to cast my mind back, but I had no idea there was anything different about my sons, because they were my first children, and they were twins, and they were boys. So all of that was a little bit complicated by, you know, people just saying, oh, of course they don't talk, you know, they're boys, they're twins, they have this like communication between them, which means they don't have to talk to the outside world. And I was like, oh, okay. One of the features with twins is that you're quite busy in their early years. They just kind of they take quite a lot of your attention, and so I kind of wasn't focused on what they weren't doing. I was kind of just pleased that they were fed and we'd got through the day. So it was only when they went to nursery school that the school picked up that there might be something different with them, and they kicked off, they got in an educational psychologist and just kicked off a whole load of assessments, really. And I just went along with it. Their dad, my husband at the time, was, you know, a bit reluctant. He was, you know, I don't want them to be labelled as anything, whereas I was more in the boat that you've just said, you know, let's just see if there's any support that they can get once they've got this label. So what's difficult about getting that diagnosis is that, especially that long ago, like 15 years ago, people, I don't know if it's any different now, but people treated you as if they were giving you news that you'd been bereaved. And so that kind of then becomes your response initially to that news. You just think, oh yeah, this must be the worst news that I've ever received, because I've not got the children that I thought I had. And actually, you've got the children you've always had. It's ridiculous. You know, who cares if they ever want to play football? I couldn't care less. In fact, I'm thrilled. I don't have to stand on a football pitch. But you are treated as though you know, the world should now feel very sorry for you because you've got this dreadful burden. I think that it's natural to fall into that for, you know, maybe a few weeks, a couple of months, while you come to terms with it, because you're kind of coached that you're coming to terms with something, and you're coming to terms with there being something wrong with your child or your children. And it takes quite a lot of searching for you to realise that there's nothing wrong with my children. They just don't do things or think in the same way that your children might think, but there's nothing wrong with them. And then what you do is you naturally go on to get books that will help you to parent this child. And for me, I gave up on those quite early, because the whole narrative about those books was how to change what you're presented with. And I had no desire to change what I was presented with. You know, I was, from a very early age with them, you know, I used to get frowned at a lot. I used to get judged a lot because of those simple things like, they absolutely have to sit at the table. I couldn't care less if they sit at the table, if they don't sit at the table. You know, if when they're older, they want to sit at a table, they will. It's, you know, and you kind of have to pick your battles quite early of what's important to you. And really, does it make any difference if they sit at a table while the rest of the adults talk at the end of a meal? It doesn't matter. Who cares? Except some people in society do care, but you have to let go quite quickly of that pressure to, like Bex mentioned, the embarrassment. It is that pressure and that embarrassment, and people looking and people saying, oh, I wouldn't let my children do that. And so it is natural, I think, to feel like you're lacking in some way as a parent, because you're letting your kids get away with something that other parents just wouldn't allow. But yeah, that's it really. I'd just say, just follow your intuition, and you know what to do.
It's quite an interesting point, actually, because it's almost as if society is sort of normalised when people think differently that it's wrong.
Yeah.
Just from a biological point of view. So I guess on that point, I know you mentioned in terms of a bit of advice, you know, taking the pressure off yourself. Is there any other advice that you'd both recommend for other parents who have neurodiverse children as well?
The table one for me is being, that is just like our defining point, I think, with our boys, because with the family, with everybody, especially with my brother's children who happen to be the same age as my children, and the difference. And for some reason, it's amazing how when you have children that don't do things the normal way, how it's really picked up on. And the table manners is just like this thing that people seem to be absolutely obsessed with. And yet when I speak to other parents who've got neurodiverse children, it seems to be like that one where soon as you actually let that go, soon as you allow yourself to say, do you know why? Why is that? Whoever comes to our house, that is we always say, even my parents now will still try to like make the boys as though it'll make everything okay. It's just manners, they have to sit there, they have to eat, and they don't need to be bouncing around, and they don't need to be like shouting and talking and food everywhere and then leave the table. And I'm just like, no, they've eaten, everything's fine. Like, nobody's getting hurt by this. It's like that makes them happy, and then we can all relax. Why does that have to be such a big deal? But yeah, that seems to be like a massive thing for everybody, and it is just like, yeah, manners. And my children, they've got manners, but equally their filter system is on another level. There is times when they'll put me in situations where they'll say things and I'll be like, oh my God, did they really just say that out loud to somebody? But I'll laugh about it afterwards. It's almost like an amazing thing when I think, I hope they don't lose that ability to be able to have the guts, or that, yeah, don't lose that filter, because it is everybody trying to change them into what's classed as normal and what's classed as acceptable. But why is that normal acceptable? As long as they're not hurting people, it is just about kind of just relaxing a little bit. And that's been the best thing for me. The more relaxed I become, the happier we are as a family. It's, once I start getting uptight and worrying about what other people are going to say and what other people are going to think, that's when it all kind of becomes much more difficult.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's just letting go of those societal norms and really assessing how important they are to you as your family, and going against the grain. I the amount of times people said to me, he needs to say sorry for that, and I said, but he's not sorry. Why are we pursuing this? He isn't sorry, and he'll do it again. So this is pointless. You cause a whole lot of trouble for something that is really servicing that other person or you, to get this child to say sorry. And I also think that my advice to parents also would be to let go a little bit of that need to be the powerful one in the relationship, because you're just not going to win every battle. And so to have that mindset of, because I said so and because I'm in charge, you will do it this way, you're just going to cause so much trouble for yourselves. There's other ways to do things. Your way isn't always going to be right. And I constantly apologize to my sons for getting it wrong, because I'm not the one that's got it right. I'm not. Sometimes I am, and sometimes we talk about how they could have done things differently, but quite often it's me that's wrong. And once you embrace the realization that you're the one that ruined that situation, tell yourself off about it and get on with it. It's fine. And let go of your own plans a little bit. Because you kind of have to, if you sit all day in this contrast of what you could have been doing while you've been forced to ride on a bus for the last 12 hours, it will eat you up. I can't remember the last time I spent time on housework. Things get roughly tidied into some sort of semblance. But if they say, I need you, we need to go and take a photo of this bus, I know how important that is. So I'd much rather have them thrilled about the photo they got of a bus than me having a really, really clear worktop. It's just about what's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all them points there come back to that same sort of overhanging topic, don't they? Just getting rid of that stigma that's attached, not only from just society in general, but as parents themselves as well. That first sort of instant switch of there's nothing actually wrong with my child, but they're just thinking a different way. Yeah. And that's completely fine. As soon as you realise that, then it's almost as if you get rid of all that sort of extra stress that you just don't need. I guess on that point, is there any myths that you'd both like to, in neurodiversity, get rid of?
Oh, mine, it's the whole disability side of it. And I know we've just kind of touched on that. But for me, there's nothing that will hold my sons back. They'll have challenges, but a lot of their challenges will be trying to get through the education system. And that's just them trying to fit in. I have no doubt in my mind that when they're doing something that they're interested in, the list of positives of ADHD, they're massive, and one of them is hyperfocus. So I know when they do something, they'll absolutely go above and beyond to the point where I'm like, wow. So I'm already coaching my kids that go through school. Hopefully there'll be parts at school that they'll love and they'll be able to get friendships from it. But I'm already saying, think about what it is that you want to do when you're older, because if you do something that you enjoy, you will absolutely excel at it. Don't get stuck in something that you don't like, because there probably will be one of the statistics where they end up with anxiety or depression, or trying to do anything to get out of that. So for me, it's not something bad that's been told. It is just getting over that. Other people thinking that it's like a disability and that it's something that's holding them back, because I definitely don't feel like that. I just feel like I have to now kind of coach them to accept that this is great. They're one of the few people that do think differently, that will be able to really bring that when they're older in whatever job they choose to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's about, stop focusing on what they can't do, because we've all got that, right? And I'd hate it if somebody said to me every day, your maths is really good. And nobody says that to me. I mean, they might talk about it amongst themselves, but that's none of my business. But they've got so many things that they can do. And I think that the problem is that they constantly come up against people that think they should be doing things differently. It's just about just taking a moment. And I think this helps every group in society, everybody that needs allies, everybody, all the different networks across Centrica, I think have all got the same thing in common. If everybody just took a moment to observe, not judge, and just be kind and patient, everybody would be fine. But, some sort of weird utopia I'm talking about there.
Yeah, I think, and I with what you say about, them being told what they can't do, as you said, Kate, it's exactly the same for everyone.
Yeah.
There used to be a lot of focus on, strengthening your weaknesses, but actually a lot of the time you're better if you focus on your strengths. And for your children, that absolutely, if you find what they're good at, they'll excel, and it's about working with what you've got, isn't it? But it's a message that goes out to absolutely all of us. I'm better if I work with my strengths. Yeah, really interesting conversation. I appreciate you both coming on. It's definitely a big piece about sort of challenging perceived societal norms. There's so much that's ingrained, so much that's historical. And as you said, it's about that, taking a moment, having some patience and some empathy, and just looking and challenging that initial thought that comes into your head and going, actually, is there something different going on here? So we definitely need people who don't conform to what's normal. Otherwise, we'd never innovate, and we'd never do anything differently to what's always been done.
Absolutely.
So, Bex and Kate, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing your experiences. It's been a really interesting session.